You're not responding to life. You're being played. How often does this happen? Someone cuts you off in traffic, and your heart rate spikes before you even think. Your boss sends a vague email, and suddenly your entire afternoon is hijacked by anxiety. A single comment on your post, and you're checking your phone every 30 seconds, crafting responses in your head while pretending to work. You think you're choosing how to react. You're not. Something outside you pulls a trigger, and you fire. Every single time. This isn't about lacking discipline. Discipline is what you use after you've already lost control. What we're talking about happens before you even realize there's a choice to make. It's the gap between stimulus and response. And, for most people, that gap doesn't exist. There is no gap. There's just the trigger, and then the reaction, so fast they feel like the same thing. Marcus Aurelius Septimus spent decades watching men mistake their conditioning for their character. He'd see a senator explode at a perceived slight, then justify it as defending his honor. He'd watch a merchant spiral into despair over a lost shipment, convinced the emotion was simply the rational response to circumstance. But here's what he understood that they didn't. The circumstance wasn't creating the response. The circumstance was revealing a pattern that was already there, already running, already in control. You've felt this. That moment right after you snap at someone you love, and there's this tiny voice asking, why did I just do that? Or when you've spent 2 hours in a rage scroll through social media, and you finally close the app wondering what you were even angry about. The reaction came first. The justification came after. And this is the trap. You think you're responding to what's happening, but you're actually responding to a hair trigger that was set years ago, maybe decades ago, and now it just sits there waiting for the right word, the right look, the right silence. And when it comes, you don't respond. You detonate. By the end of this, you'll know exactly why. You keep reacting in ways you swear you won't. And the one Stoic practice that creates actual space between what happens to you and what you do about it. Dominic Stone was the kind of controlled you'd notice. Sharp jaw, measured words. The type who'd wake at 5 without an alarm and complete his morning routine with mechanical precision. He'd built his entire identity around discipline. Control the body, control the mind, control the outcome. For years, it worked. Then his business partner sent him a text. 9 words. We need to talk about the direction of things. He read it during a meeting, felt his chest tighten, told himself it was nothing. Professional conversation happens all the time, but his hand was already reaching for his phone again. Checking for a follow-up. 3 minutes later, checking again. The meeting continued around him, but he wasn't there anymore. He was in his head, running scenarios. What did she mean by direction? Was this about the last quarterly review? That decision he made about hiring? By lunch, he'd convinced himself the partnership was ending. By evening, he'd mentally prepared a counteroffer it was never asked to make. She called him the next day, wanted to discuss expanding into a new market. Excited about growth, the conversation lasted 12 minutes. His reaction had lasted 18 hours. He sat there after the call, staring at his desk. This was supposed to be handled. Years of discipline, of controlling his environment, his schedule, his responses. And 9 words on a screen had hijacked an entire day. That's when something Marcus Aurelius Septimus used to say cut through. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Dominic had always interpreted that as, build enough discipline, and outside events won't matter. But that's not what it means. It means outside events will always come. The text will always arrive, the vague email, the unexpected delay, the criticism, the silence, What you have power over isn't whether these things affect you. It's the space between the thing and your response to the thing. And Dominic realized he had no space. His partner sent a text, and his nervous system responded like she'd declared war. Autonomic. Instant. No thought required. This is what the Stoics actually trained for. Not to build thicker skin. Not to care less. To see the trigger as it's being pulled. Epictetus taught his students that we're disturbed not by events, but by our view of events. But here's the part that gets lost. Your view isn't something you consciously choose in the moment. Your view is already there, already formed, already loaded. It's the lens you're not aware you're looking through. When that text arrived, Dominic didn't choose to interpret it as a threat. His system classified it as a threat before he finished reading it. And then every thought afterward was his conscious mind trying to make sense of what his body had already decided. The reaction trap isn't that you respond to things. It's that something in you responds before you even arrive. And then you mistake that preloaded response for reality, for rational thinking, for justified emotion. You're not seeing what happened. You're seeing what happened filtered through every trigger that was set before this moment. Dominic started practicing something different. When a trigger came, instead of managing the reaction, he'd pause and name it. Out loud if he was alone. In his head if he wasn't. This feels like a threat, not this is a threat. This feels like one. That tiny distinction created a gap. A gap between the sensation and the story. And in that gap, choice became possible. Not always. Not perfectly. But sometimes. And sometimes was more than he'd ever had before. Next time something triggers you, before you respond, before you craft the argument or spiral into worry, say this one sentence out loud. This feels like, and name the feeling, not the situation. The feeling. This feels like rejection. This feels like failure. This feels like disrespect. You're not analyzing it. You're not journaling about it. You're creating 1 second of separation between the stimulus and the response. 1 second where you're the observer, not the reaction. Do that enough times and the gap starts to widen. And in that gap, you stop being played. The next step changes everything.